War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Of the Chinese in Mandarin. We've got a lot to get to today. Very busy Saturday as President Trump's team attempts to close on his victory on November 3rd. I want to start off with, I think, one of the most important patriots in this country, Lin Wood, joins us now. Lin Wood is a renowned lawyer. He's representing Kyle Rittenhouse, which we're going to get to in a minute. But there's a headline, one of the leading headlines in CNN as we bring Lin Wood on, is how Georgia proves Trump has no chance of winning. How Georgia proves Trump has no chance of winning. It's by Harry Enton. And Harry is, I think, the chief and the head of all polling and statistics at CNN. So I want to bring Lin Wood in now. Lin Wood, we're going to get to the Rittenhouse situation in a little while, but I want to go right to the heart of the matter. You've had one of the most compelling lawsuits in this entire endeavor. In your lawsuit, you're not doing it as part of the campaign. You're doing it representing yourself and, I guess, other citizens of Georgia. The other day seemed to be some confusion in which it looked like a judge threw out your lawsuit because you were asking for some sort of injunctive relief on something related to what the campaign was doing. Our phone's been blowing up and people have been asking, what is the current status of your suit and why do you think that's such a winner?
Well, good morning, Steve. The good news is my lawsuit in Georgia is alive and well. There was some confusion in the court's ruling on a motion for a temporary injunction related to the sham recount that was underway in Georgia in an effort to stop the certification. The judge has entered an order now, and he did not and could not have, under the law, ruled on my main case. So the thrust of my lawsuit and why I filed it remains intact to be litigated, and I believe it will be eventually litigated through the 11th Circuit and perhaps to the Supreme Court. The case is simple. The Secretary of State of Georgia, back in March of 2020, in a backdoor deal, unknown to even members of the state legislature until I filed the lawsuit, the Secretary of State entered into a deal with the Democratic Party in a lawsuit that had been filed by Perkins Coie. I refer to him as the Hillary Clinton firm. And they changed the substantive rules as they related to the absentee ballots, the old mail fraud part of the case, as I call it. They're not allowed to do that. The Secretary of State cannot make a change in the federal election laws or the laws related to a federal election without it being done by the legislature. The legislature did not make the change. There's Supreme Court precedent that says that, therefore, it's an unlawful election. So I'm confident, as I was when I filed it, that I'm right about the law, and eventually the Georgia election is going to be deemed unlawful and also, secondarily, a violation of equal protection in terms of the distinctions drawn between people that voted in person and the individuals who were allowed to vote by mail.
Here's what's shocking about this, and let me take it one part at a time. The Secretary of State, who's been a very controversial figure in this, ran on a ticket of which he's rubbing everybody's nose in it on CNN and MSNBC right now, about he ran on guaranteeing fair elections, elections with no technical difficulties or screw-ups in them. This was what he essentially ran on. How did he, knowing the law, because this is not unknown that state legislatures have to do this, what possessed him to actually enter into, and this consent is, it's a detailed, highly negotiated contract. It's a highly negotiated deal. This clearly had to be kicking around. What was in his mind that he thought he could just sign this, make it part of the federal election, and not have anybody question it later and attempt to throw out the entire election about it?
Steve, I don't want to try to get into Brad Raffensperger's mind because I don't think it's a good place to be. I believe that at some point in time there's going to have to be an investigation, a criminal investigation, to determine who received monies when Dominion sold voting machines, new machines, to the state of Georgia in 2019. These machines were never used before the elections in 2020. So we need to find out, follow the money, and find out perhaps why people did then what they did and why they're doing now what they're doing. Brad Raffensperger, if he promised to run on a campaign of a valid, legitimate, lawful election process, then he ran his campaign on a lie, because the process in Georgia was flawed from the beginning in the computer voting system, and it was horribly flawed, as shown by the sham recount. It was horribly flawed as it relates to these mail-in ballots. They set up a situation where fraud was easier, and let me tell you, fraud occurred on an overwhelming basis. So Brad Raffensperger and the governor of the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp, they got a lot of questions to answer to the citizens of Georgia who voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. They may have to answer questions to a federal prosecutor down the road. There's also questions regarding Chinese money that came into Georgia in connection with the purchase of COVID-19 masks, gowns, and China test kits. It's like going out and buying bullets from the enemy. There was a lot of money that went down there, and there's some evidence that would suggest that some of that money in that China deal ended up in the pockets of Brian Kemp's advisors and consultants, maybe even in Brian Kemp's family's pocket. So right now I would tell you that the people in the leadership positions, albeit called Republicans, I think they're corrupt. I think they were in on this, either wittingly or unwittingly. I suggest it's probably the former, but there's a lot of fraud in Georgia in connection with this election, and I believe in time every lie is going to be revealed, and the public is going to know that the election in Georgia was an absolute unlawful election and was a fraud.
Raffensperger, on the sham recount, Raffensperger basically certified it as Secretary of State, and then it was interesting. We kept hearing yesterday that the governor is going to come up about noon and certify it, but then he gave a statement, and what he said, actually more than a statement, what he said is very different than I think what people felt he was going to do. It appears he gave himself some wiggle room. He didn't really give a hard certification of this, or am I misinterpreting? You're the lawyer. Let's go to what Kemp said yesterday. Is his position right now this thing certified, or is he leaving some room for the Trump campaign and citizens of Georgia to press on with this?
The answer is yes. Judge Grimberg, when he ruled from the bench on the temporary injunction motion, noted clearly and correctly that the president has the right, after certification, to ask for a recount. If I heard what Kemp said yesterday, if you believe him, he's going to do it correctly. He's going to go in and look, for example, at the absentee ballots, to look at the signature on the ballot, the signature on the envelope, and, importantly, the signature on the original voter registration card. You're going to find a lot of fraud when he looks into that. You're also going to find fraud where they have any number, large numbers of pristine absentee ballots. Pristine meaning they were supposed to be folded, they were supposed to be placed in an envelope. There were stacks of absentee ballots that were not folded, had no creases, and very interestingly, had almost perfect bubble dot fill-in. I think it was done by a computer. And analyze those original ballots is forensics 101. They can easily tell whether it was done by ink or whether it was done, as I believe, by a computer. Those ballots almost exclusively only voted for Biden and did not include down-ballot votes. So they had a number of ways to defraud through the mail-in ballots. And if Kemp does what he's supposed to do and does an actual audit where they verify the difference between legal and illegal votes, I think that recount will result in President Trump winning what we know he won, and that is a landslide victory in Georgia. But we're also talking to some of the state legislators here, and there's another process where we can go into court and a legislator can file for a writ of mandamus to require the governor to hold a special session of the legislature so the legislature can deal with the question of the election as well as the vote for the electors to go to the Electoral College on December 14th. The citizens of Georgia are outraged, and I think Brian Kemp is feeling the heat as well he should. Many state legislators are outraged. This fraud in Georgia is not going to stand, Steve.
Lin, one technical, and we would appreciate if you could stay over through the break and join us for the next segment, because this is what's happening in Georgia, and your leadership is so important here. One of the issues we have in Pennsylvania, and I think actually in Wisconsin, you mentioned that the ballots themselves, the envelopes to check the signatures, and then the voter registration. And unfortunately, in other states, I think one of the problems we have right now is a commingling. The ballots have been out of the envelopes. They've been mingled and counted. I think this is going to take place. I think this is going to be the reality of Wisconsin and Michigan and in Pennsylvania. So some very tough decisions are going to have to be made by both election officials, government officials, and the state legislatures, right, as they go through the courts. In Georgia right now, as you see it, is that not been commingled? You actually can technically go back and do what you're requesting be done, that you go back and check, or what you're saying should be done on this real audit/recount, that they actually have the ballots, they have the envelopes so you can check the signatures, and obviously you can check that to the voter registration. But have the ballots been separated from the envelopes so you can't go back and actually, put the genie back in the bottle?
I'm not sure you can put the genie back in the bottle on all of the absentee mail-in ballots. I know yesterday, Steve, that a patriot up in Cobb County, Georgia, spotted and videoed an A1 shredding and recycling truck at one of the election sites in Cobb County, shredding documents, shredding ballots, perhaps shredding envelopes. So we're looking into that particular incident. But the problem is one that can be solved if you've got a signature on a ballot and you cannot verify it by the envelope. That ballot's got to go through. It's got to be thrown out. They should be able, on a ballot, to compare it to the original voter's registration card back when they initially registered in Georgia. And I bet you that they're going to find any number of those don't match. They had it set up in Georgia and around the country where people were inundated by mail with ballots.
Yeah. Lin, just hang on 1 second.
We want you to vote by mail.
Lin, just hang on 1 second. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Lin Wood. We'll return now to one of America's most prominent lawyers, a voice of reason. That would be Lin Wood. Lin, one of the things we try to do here in the War Room is cut through the fog of war. And this is a battle. It's a war. It's on many fronts, from Nevada to Arizona, Wisconsin. You've got guys on 5-hour conference calls in these commissions that we're live streaming and listening to. The whole world had 1 million views on Posobiec the other day just watching these commissioners. The entire world is watching this, not just about the righteousness of President Trump's cause and the closing that victory, but also to see democracy in work and see free men and women who will not back down and let something be stolen. Could you just take a second and walk through, and just let's take Georgia, the complexity of what's going on down there, because there's 3 fronts. There's a audit recount front, there's a legal front with you and other lawsuits, and then there's the state legislature. We know we have a hard drive a stake in the ground on the 14th of December. That's when this thing comes to a climax. What electors, if any, go to state capitals to sit for the Electoral College? Between now and then, and particularly over the next 10 days of Thanksgiving, can you walk us through the critical path of how you see this thing proceeding?
Sure. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I believe the Georgia election is going to have to be decided in terms of the electors by the state legislature. So we've got to take the path of trying to force the governor by mandamus or otherwise to timely order a special session of the Georgia legislature. That could be done by mandamus. It can be done by public pressure. My lawsuit, if we can get an expedited ruling on a motion for summary judgment, can get to the 11th Circuit. And the 11th Circuit can rule the election is unlawful. That's going to force the governor then to have the special session of the legislature. So I believe also, and I don't speak for the president's campaign or the president's legal team. I work with them under a joint and common interest agreement because of my case. But I believe there's going to be a lawsuit also filed in Georgia next week on behalf of the president. So there's 3 different or 4 different ways to approach what I think is the ultimate objective. The state legislature in Georgia is going to have to choose the electors to go to vote for the president in the 12th Amendment. The down-ballot votes and all the fraud that occurred there will have to be done by another election in January. But the key is the December 14th date is in stone. And the founding fathers had the wisdom to do our presidential election by electors and the Electoral College. That's where this decision is going to be rendered. It may be that the recount, if it's timely and if it is properly done, is going to itself speak to the fact that Donald Trump won. Another avenue for the electors to be chosen for Donald Trump. This is going to go down to the state legislators, and those people speak for the people. They represent the people. They're close to the ground, and they know that the people in Georgia voted probably 70+% for Donald Trump. The facts don't lie. The media lies, and the Democratic Party and the people that are trying to overthrow our government are liars. This is a fundamental choice America will make. Do you want to live free, or do you want to live under tyranny?
Lin, the stakes, and the reason we want to focus on Georgia is that, as we said from the beginning, one state reverses this, or one state calls it into question at the official level, the entire set of dominoes starts to fall, right? And that's why Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada, because it's so blatant of what happened there, you know, it could be the key that picks the lock. Do you see judges? Do you see state legislatures? Do you see Kemp? Because this is going to be a profile in courage. This will be remembered in American history. The entire world will be watching, and the entire media apparatus, the entire party of Davos, the entire, Great Reset movement, every investment bank, all the corporatists, and particularly a place like Atlanta that has now become, essentially not just one of the great, or not the greatest city in the South and one of the best cities and greatest cities in America, but has become kind of a world city with a strong international influence. Are there people there that have that type of moral courage that will stand up when the entire world, the entire global reset movement, the entire party of Davos comes to tear them apart?
I believe there are members of the state legislature that have that courage. I know that the people of Georgia have that courage. In terms of whether the lower court judges have that courage, I don't know. But I believe the 11th Circuit is a solid circuit. I believe they have the courage, and I'd like to believe that our Supreme Court still has the integrity to rule correctly and in accordance with the law. The law is clear, Steve. The state legislature is the only entity that can change the rules of this game in terms of a federal election in Georgia, not the Secretary of State. So I know that we're right on the law. I know that I'm confident that we're right on how this vote went in favor of the president. So it may be one or more people that have to take courageous stances, but the courage they're taking is only courage based on asserting the truth. And I believe there are people here that still care about the truth, and I believe when the truth is exposed, the legislature in Georgia is going to vote for electors that will support Donald Trump. That's the will of the people as expressed by a legitimate vote. I don't believe that a fraudulent vote is going to be certified through the legislature. I don't believe that the fraudulent, quote-unquote, president-elect, as deemed by the media, is ever going to set foot in the Oval Office. Truth is going to prevail. And I hope and pray that it prevails in Georgia. I have great confidence that it will.
Lin, I want to pivot we got a few minutes left in the segment to this, I think, kind of a miracle you pulled off over the last 48 48 hours about Kyle Rittenhouse. Can you tell us about how you actually got bail for him and actually got him home?
A couple of months before the incident in Kenosha, I had formed a 501c4 foundation in Texas, hashtag Fight Back Foundation, with the idea that we would go forward and help preserve, protect, and defend our constitutional rights. I got involved at the request of many people in the Kyle Rittenhouse matter. My foundation assembled a criminal defense team for him, and when we found out his bail was $2 million cash, we've been working long hours to try to raise that money. And I'm proud of all the many people that worked hard on it, and I can't speak highly enough about the many thousands of people that contributed to it. We finally got over the top with contributions from actor Ricky Schroeder and MyPillow CEO and founder Mike Lindell, and we were able yesterday to post a $2 million cash bail, and Kyle is now free. He's out of jail for the first time since August the 25th. He'll be with his family at Thanksgiving. It could be described as a miracle. I believe it was an act of God, but I think it was undertaken by many thousands of patriots who knew this boy was innocent. He acted in self-defense. It's all captured on video. So I'm just thankful that the boy is home. He's a fine young man, and he's going to do a lot of great things for America. Eventually, he will be exonerated. You can't get around the video. It was all filmed. The video camera eye does not lie.
Lin, just to sum up, we got a couple minutes, and we've become, this show has metastasized over the last month or two, and particularly since Election Day, to now be one of the biggest in the world. And one of the reasons is we try to become an information center, not to put spin or partisan spin on something, but to give the facts. There are good days and bad days in this fight coming forward. Do you have any? What would you like to tell our audience about what they not should just look for, but how they can help, how they can assist, and how they have to steel themselves for what's ahead? Because we're coming to a climax of one of the most important times in American history. We're going to be one thing or the other at the end of this by December 14th. We're either going to be the republic that was bequeathed to us or something radically different. Do you have any words for the audience before we let you go?
I think the audience has to do what the people that were our founding fathers did in 1776. I think you've got to pledge your life, your money, and your sacred honor so that the generations that come after us can live in freedom. I don't believe the people trying to take over our country are going to let go when it's exposed that the election was a fraud. I think there are plans in place to do other things to try to take over our government. I think 2020 is the year they want to do it. Old George Soros said he was going to get it done and get rid of Trump. So I think the people need to have courage. I think they need to be prepared to fight for their freedom. And I think at this time, more than any time in my lifetime, people need to have faith in God.
Lin, how do people follow you? Twitter or your the Fight Back website? How do people get to you?
On Twitter, my handle is @LinWood, Lin Wood, and then on Parler, I'm at Lin Wood, LinWood. I've read the replies and the people that comment on my post on Twitter and Parler, and I know the spirit is there. The country is ready to do what is necessary to preserve freedom. I think that patriots have to come together. They need to be prepared to stay in touch with each other. They need to be prepared for some difficult days ahead, but they need to have confidence and faith that this nation was founded under God. And I don't believe that the communism is ever going to rule the day in America, even though it may have infiltrated our government in the last 20 years. Freedom is going to prevail, Steve.
Lin, thank you very much. Make me proud to be an American and a Southerner. Thank you, sir. Lin Wood.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to return. We're going to go from Georgia and South Carolina. We're going to go to Switzerland next as people throughout the world want to figure out the math in back of the big steal. Patriots throughout the world are coming together. It's a gathering of the tribes. Next on War and Pandemic.